Well, hello everybody. What I need to do is show you what you missed last time when we did the quadratic formula. What we did 2 times ago was completing the square. And today what I got to do is show you a method that we can use to solve any quadratic equation called the quadratic formula. On the next 2 slides here, I do have the answers to your worksheet for the completing the square. So those are your answers. You could pause the video and check your work, check your answers there. There's your page 2 of it. And of course, if you have any questions, buzz in and I'll get you straightened out on that. But I need to get to the meat of the lesson with you today. What I've done on this screen right here is I derived what's called the quadratic formula. Notice that there's a lot of numbers in there, and I'm able to derive it because I'm a math major. But what I wanted to do is show you at the very end what happens if you solve any quadratic using the method of completing the square. You get a formula that you can use to solve any quadratic in the whole wide world. What do I need to do today? I just need to show you how to do the quadratic formula. So hopefully you got your examples right there in front of you. Keep up with me and we'll go from there. So look at your very first example that says 2x squared plus 5x minus 3. What I need to do first is I need to point out that notice that this thing's set equal to 0. Also notice that your a value is 2, your b value is positive 5, and your c value is negative 3. What we're going to do with those numbers is simply plug them into the quadratic formula. So here's what I'm going to have. And write it just like I do, and pause the video if you need to run the numbers through your calculator. Excuse me. So here goes. It says the opposite of b first. So I'm going to write down negative 5 plus or minus the square root of. Now I'm working under this radical. It says b squared, so I got 5 squared minus my 4 times my a value, which is 2, times my c value, which is negative 3. All of that over 2 times your a value, which is 4. I like to list my numbers. That way it's easier for me to plug them in. Now at this moment, do exactly as I do. You're going to now have the opposite of 5 plus or minus the square root of something over 4. What you'll do now at this point, you'll grab your calculator and you'll run through the b squared minus 4ac part. So you'll type in your calculator 5 squared minus 4 times 2 times negative 3. I'm going to go a little slow at this first one. I'm going to give you a second to do that real fast, because this is key. If you can't do this on your calculator, it's going to mess everything up. Do not hit the square root button yet. Just run that part through your calculator. And if you do that, you should get 49. Now, the next step then is I'm going to write down the opposite of b plus or minus. Hey, the square root of 49 is 7. All over 4. These steps will not change. The only thing that's going to change is this number right here. Hey, now to go get your 2 answers, I'm going to go negative 5 plus 7 is 2 over 4. So one of my answers is 1/2. The other answer, negative 5 minus 7, negative 12 over 4, which becomes negative 3. Those are your solutions to that. I'm just going to keep rolling with the examples. Here's your number 2. In this case, my a value is 14. My b value is 9. And my c value is 1. I'm now just going to plug those numbers into the quadratic formula. So it says the opposite of b. Well, b is 9. So I've got negative 9 plus or minus the square root of 9 squared minus 4 times 14 times 1 all over 2 times my a value, which would give me 28. Hey, now just a trip down memory lane. If this number right here is negative, you need to put that in parentheses. And then I'm going to go negative 9 plus or minus something over 28. You got to go get that something. So you're going to go 9 squared minus 4 times 14 times 1, and you should get 25. Our next step is break down the radical. Since this is example 2, this is another easy one. This right here is a perfect square. So I now have negative 9 plus or minus 5 all over 28. Now let's go get our two answers. Negative 9 plus 5 is negative 4 over 28. So one answer is negative 1/7. My other answer, negative 9 minus 5, which is negative 14 over 28, is going to give me negative 1/2. So there's the quadratic formula. The only thing I'm going to change is the number underneath the radical. So here goes our next one. In this case, my A value is 6, my B value is 2, my C value is negative 1. Let's plug those in. So I got the opposite of B. So I've got negative 2 plus or minus the square root of B squared. So I got 2 squared minus 4 times my A value of 6 times my B value of negative 1 all over 2 times my A value. And A happens to be 6, so this becomes 12. I'm going to do like I did my other ones. I now have negative 2 plus or minus the square root of something over 12. You're going to go get that something. So you're going to go 2 squared minus 4 times 6 times negative 1. And in this case, you're going to get 28. Hey, now notice 28 isn't a perfect square, but it is a radical that you could break down like we did the other days. So I'm going to think of 28 as the square root of 4 times the square root of 7. Now when I do this, I now have negative 2 plus or minus. Another name for the square root of 4 is 2 radical 7 all over 12. Normally we would be done right now, and I call this the triangle. Look at the numbers right there, there, and there. The negative 2, the 2, and the 12. See if you can find a number that goes into all three of those. It's got to go into all three of them. In this case, 2 goes into all of them. So here's my ending answer. Negative 2 divided by 2 is negative 1 plus or minus 2 divided by 2 is 1 times the square root of 7 all over 12 divided by 2 is 6. So there's my final answer. You can't simplify it anymore because of that radical. Here goes my number 4. On number 4, in this case, my A value is going to be 5. My B value is going to be 4. My C value is going to be 3. When I start running these through, I'm going to have the opposite of B plus or minus the square root of B squared, so 4 squared, minus 4 times my A value times my C value, all over 2 times my A value, which is 10. Hey, notice that I use parentheses this time. That's no big deal. You can use times or parentheses. So now I'm going to ask you to go negative 4 plus or minus the square root of something over 10. You got to go get that something. So when you go 4 squared minus 4 times 5 times 3, you're going to get negative 44. Now we reduce the radical. Hey, so something that you know, since there's a negative right here, an I is going to show up in the answer. So I got negative 4 plus or minus. There's going to be an I because of that negative. And I'm going to think this is square root of 4, square root of 11. all over 10. Something I know the square root of times something I don't. And then this becomes negative 4 plus or minus. The square root of 4 is 2, so I got 2I radical 11 all over 10. Normally we'd be done, but see the 4, the 2, and the 10? I'm looking for a number that goes into all three of them, and a 2 does. So here's my final answer. Negative 4 divided by 2 is negative 2 plus or minus. 2 divided by 2 is 1. I still have that I. I still have that radical 11 all over 10 divided by 2 is 5. That's the quadratic formula. I'm going to quickly go through the last couple because there's something I want to backtrack and point out for you. But that's the steps of the quadratic formula. I'm going to pick the pace up on number 5 and number 6. So on number 5, I know my A value is 8, my B value is 5, my C value is negative 2. So I'm going to have the opposite of B, so negative 5 plus or minus 5 squared minus 4 times 8 times negative 2 all over 16. Just like we did. Now I'm going to have negative 5 plus or minus the square root of something all over 16. And when you go do that something, in this case it turns out to be 89. If you look at the square root of 89, it does not reduce. So your answer is the opposite of 5 plus or minus square root of 89 all over 16. You can't do anything else with it. You're done. My number 6, just to kind of speed things along with you, when you start filling in your numbers, I'm going to get negative 5 plus or minus 5 squared minus 4 times 8 times negative 3 all over 16. When you run that through, you're going to get negative 5 plus or minus the square root of 121 all over 16. Now you got to look at the radical. So I've got negative 5 plus or minus 11 all over 16. Since there's no radical here, we just got to go get our answers now. So here goes. Negative 5 plus 11 is going to be 6 divided by 16. A better name for that is 3/8. Negative 5 minus 11 is negative 16 over 16. So negative 1 is my other answer. So there goes. That's the quadratic formula. I will show you just a piece of number 7. Then I'm going to start talking about the back. But I'll backtrack and show you something. When you do number 7, you're going to get this. You're going to have positive 40 plus or minus negative 40 squared. Notice I put that in parentheses. Minus 4 times A times C all over 50. Now watch what happens on this one. When I run this part through my calculator, I get 0. The square root of 0 is 0. So in this case, there's just one answer. Because 40 plus 0 and 40 minus 0 is the same thing, 40. So I'm going to get 40 over 50, which reduces to 4/5. That's the main part of the quadratic formula. I'm not done yet because there's some stuff on the back I need to show you. But hang with me one second. Now I need to look back at the start so I can point something out. This part right here, the b squared minus 4ac part, that's called the discriminant. The discriminant's really important in the quadratic formula because it tells you how many answers you're going to have and what kind of answers they're going to be. So just for a trip down memory lane, we talked about this the very first week of school, so I know it's been a while. When you look at this one, the discriminant value is 49. The discriminant value is 49. I know the square root of 49. It's 7. Look at the answers I got. I got 2 fractional answers. These are called rational numbers. Look at your number 2. The value of the discriminant was 25. I know the square root of 25. As soon as I knew the square root of 25, I knew I was going to get 2 rational numbers. Rational means there's no radical in there. Rational means it could be written as a fraction. Here's my number 3. The value of my discriminant in this case was 28. I don't know the square root of 28. So look at my answer. It had a radical in it. These are called 2 irrational solutions or roots. So if you know the square root of it, rational. If you don't know the square root of it, irrational. Hey, notice in this one, the value of the discriminant was negative 44. Whenever a negative number shows up, I know I'm going to have an I in my answer. These kind of answers, they're called 2 complex solutions. Okay. Look at your backside real fast. Some rules on the discriminant, and I'll kind of put them here just in layman's terms, but some things that you do. If the value of b squared minus 4ac, if it's a perfect square that's greater than 0, it's got to be perfect square, and it's got to be more than 0. It's got to be greater than 0. Then there's going to be 2 what we call rational solutions, or roots. If b squared minus 4ac, something that we don't know the square root of, so not a perfect square, but it's still positive, there's going to be 2 irrational solutions. If b squared minus 4ac is negative, there's going to be what we call 2 complex numbers. And the last but not least, if b squared minus 4ac equals 0, there's going to be 1 rational solution. Okay, so while I got you a little confused there, look at the back side of your worksheet real fast. X squared plus 12x equal negative 4. What I need to do with that first, guys, is I need to set it equal to 0. So let me write this as x squared plus 12x plus 4 equals 0. Here's what I'd like to do on part A. On part A, it says find the value of the discriminant. So I need to go b squared minus 4 times a times c. Then I'm just going to grab my calculator and I'm going to run that through real fast. And when I do that, I get 128. So on part B, here's what I got to ask myself. Do I know the square root of 128? And the answer is no. But it is positive. So I know there's going to be 2 irrational roots. And on part C, we're just going to go do the quadratic formula, just like we did on the front side. So I'm going to have the opposite of b plus or minus the square root of, well, we've already done the b squared minus 4ac part, and get 128 all over 2 times my a value, which is 2. And then I got to reduce this, so this becomes negative 12 plus or minus something I know the square root of that goes in 128 is 64 and 2 all over 2. I now have negative 12 plus or minus 8 radical 2 over 2. Ending answer? Notice a 2 goes into all of these, so I've got negative 6 plus or minus 4 radical 2, don't divide the radical, over 2 divided by 2 is 1. So there it is. Just like what we did on the front side. I'm just asking you before you go get the answer, tell me what kind they are. Here's your number 10, I'm sorry. On part A, I'm going to evaluate b squared minus 4ac. So I'm going to go negative 6 squared minus 4 times 9 times 1. And when I run that through, guys, I get 0. That tells me that there's going to be one rational answer. Now I'm going to ask you to go get that rational answer. So on part C, I'm going to do the quadratic formula. So I'm going to go the opposite of b, 6, plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac, but it's 0, all over 2 times your a value, which is 18. This becomes 6 plus or minus 0 over 18. Well, my only answer, 6 over 18, which is 1/3. I'm going to do number 11, and then I'm going to call it good for the day, guys. Here's your number 11. So on part A, we're going to evaluate the discriminant. So I'm going to go parentheses, negative 4 squared, minus 4 times a times c. When I run that through my calculator earlier, I got negative 160. As soon as a negative shows up, I know I'm going to have 2 complex roots. As soon as that negative showed up, I knew they were going to be imaginary numbers. Now let's go finish off the quadratic formula. So I've got the opposite of b plus or minus the square root of the negative 160. Let me write that a little nicer for you. Negative 160 all over 8. Now I need to reduce this. So I got 4 plus or minus. I know there's going to be an I in my answer. Out of 160, something I know the square root of times something I don't, 16 and 10. Square root of 16 is 4, radical 10, all over 8. So I got 4 plus or minus 4i, radical 10, all over 8. Hey, I see a 4 goes into all 3 of those. So here's my ending answer. 4 divided by 4 is 1, plus or minus 4 divided by 4 is 1. So I got I radical 10 all over 8 divided by 4 is 2. So there's the lesson. I skipped number 12, 13, and 14 just for time. This video is already almost 25 minutes. But that's the steps of the quadratic formula. Get a great start on your worksheet. Hopefully you followed along. You can always rewind the video and watch it again if you'd like. So good luck on it.